Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi the target of a daring raid in Syria,
History will regard Baghdadi as a bloodthirsty tyrant,
where authorities reportedly found him and what it means in the fight against terror.
Also breaking overnight, reports that at least 2 people were killed and at least 10 injured at a party near Texas A&M University.
All first responders prepare for a possible mass casualty event.
Police, helicopters, and ambulances rushing to the scene. We'll have the very latest on this breaking story.
Developing right now, California fire danger. The extremely critical conditions creating a tinderbox. And this smoke-nado. The new evacuations this morning as the power company cuts electricity to nearly 1 million people. And the forecast predicting things could get even worse.
Bathroom camera? A Southwest flight attendant accusing pilots of planting a device in the plane's lavatory and streaming the video. The lawsuit over it and the airline's response this morning.
And comeback kids, the Astros tying up the World Series in dramatic fashion.
This is gone.
The Grand Slam moment and a rookie pitcher's striking feat.
Live from ABC News in New York, this is Good Morning America.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Let's get right to our top story, the apparent death of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS. This is a story with major implications for this terror group, for the future of a volatile region, and for the political fortunes of President Trump.
Baghdadi reportedly died in a raid carried out by U.S. forces in Syria. The news began to break overnight when President Trump tweeted out the words, quote, "Something very big has just happened."
And we are expecting to hear from the president himself in just a few hours. We have team coverage this morning. Ian Pannell and Martha Raddatz standing by. But we begin at the White House with ABC's Terry Moran. Terry, good morning.
Good morning, Wake. Good morning, guys. Something very big did happen. This is a major victory over extremist terror and in the chaos in Syria. The death of the leader of ISIS, who led that shadowy group to almost unimaginable triumphs and died last night on the orders of President Trump at the hands of U.S. Special Forces. This morning, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the shadowy leader of the terror organization ISIS and one of the most wanted men in the world, is believed dead after a U.S. Special Forces raid. President Trump tweeting overnight, "Something very big has just happened." U.S. officials telling ABC News the reclusive founder of the Islamic State was the target of the American raid Saturday in Idlib in northwestern Syria. Another official telling ABC News al-Baghdadi is believed to have detonated a suicide vest as U.S. Special Forces carried out the ground raid, the blast also killing 2 of his wives. Al-Baghdadi is responsible for the brutal deaths of thousands of people who opposed his self-proclaimed caliphate ideologies and torturing anyone seen as a threat. Al-Baghdadi's reign began in the early summer of 2014.
History will regard Baghdadi as a bloodthirsty tyrant. I mean, during his reign, his organization conquered a vast stretch of territory, ruled over something like 5 million people, and he imposed his iron will and executed anyone who stood in his way.
It was the American invasion of Iraq in 2003 that seems to have shaped al-Baghdadi, especially after he was detained by the U.S. military.
The United States didn't view Baghdadi as a high-value detainee. So they released him after 10 months of custody in Abu Ghraib and also Camp Bucca. But it was in those places where he made some important connections with people that would later rise with him through the ranks of the Islamic State.
U.S. officials are holding off on a formal announcement until confirmation from the terrorist's fingerprints. President Trump is expected to make an announcement later this morning. And that will happen here at the White House. That formal confirmation can come from Baghdadi's fingerprints and other biological markers because he was in U.S. custody, and they've got that information. Eva?
Now, Terry, the president has really been under tough scrutiny. The impeachment inquiry, members of his own party criticizing him for his decision in Syria. Is this a big victory for the president?
Sure, it is a big victory for the president. It's also the kind of thing that Americans expect presidents to accomplish. I mean, it is hard to remember. I was in northern Iraq and Syria in 2014 when ISIS seemed unstoppable under al-Baghdadi's leadership. President Trump is the one who decided to double down on eliminating their territorial gains. Now he's killed the leader. This is the kind of presidential leadership that people do expect.
Right. Terry Moran for us at the White House this morning. Terry, thank you. Whit?
And this development, Eva, expected to have a big impact on ISIS and in the region. ABC's senior foreign correspondent Ian Pannell joins us from our London bureau with more. And Ian, you've covered ISIS extensively in Syria and Iraq. With the death of al-Baghdadi, the group's reclusive leader, how significant of a blow could this be for ISIS?
Yeah, morning, Wes. Look, I think that is the key question. I think it's important in as much as Baghdadi is a key figurehead, the man responsible for tens of thousands of deaths, of rape, of pillage, of occupation. So it will be a blow to the morale of the group. And don't forget the families of US, British, European and other hostages who were beheaded by the group, the Yazidi women who were taken as sex slaves, the many countless families who were murdered by ISIS. They will all be celebrating this day. But pretty much since the fall of the so-called caliphate, ISIS isn't really a strictly hierarchical organisation, and so the physical impact on the group is likely to be limited. Whit?
And Ian, as we've mentioned and touched on, the past 2 weeks have come with extraordinary developments in Syria. President Trump abruptly moving U.S. troops, Turkey and Russia beefing up their positions. What could the death of the ISIS leader mean for the shifting power dynamic in the region?
Well, I think on one level, it probably doesn't change much. Because they've now morphed into this guerrilla-type insurgency, I think we should expect that to continue. In fact, after US troops withdrew and Turkish troops came across that border, we already saw an uptick in ISIS attacks cross over the border into Iraq, and we're seeing exactly the same thing, ISIS regrouping. Now, it's true to say there was a huge victory. The caliphate was defeated. It's not what it used to be. Significant danger. Whit?
All right, Ian Pannell for us in our London bureau. Thank you. Dan?
For more on this, let's bring in our chief global affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz. She's in Washington, where she's going to be hosting This Week later this morning. Martha, good morning to you. I want to follow up on what Ian and Whit were talking about there, the impact this is likely to have on ISIS. As we know, ISIS formed when the U.S., under President Obama, pulled out of Iraq, leaving behind a power vacuum. Now, President Trump has us pulling out of Syria to a large extent. So even though Baghdadi has died, do we still have a sort of terrorist breeding ground there that we need to worry about?
Well, I think that is a real concern because, as you heard, Baghdadi had been in prison in Baghdad, in Iraq, in about 2004, spent 10 months there. I remember looking at those prisons, and they had all of the extremists in one place, the real high-value targets, although he wasn't labeled as such then, but they had them all together. It was a breeding ground for extremists at the time, and that is a real concern now in Syria, especially because we're pulling out most of the troops there. You have seen those massive prisons. You have seen some of those escapes. About 100 escaped, although I know some of them have been recaptured. But that is a concern, especially with U.S. forces moving out. What happens next? I also want to go back to 2011. Osama bin Laden was killed in May of 2011. President Obama pulled out all American forces from Iraq at the end of that year. And, of course, they returned with al-Baghdadi as the leader.
Let's get back to this idea, or say more about this idea of what the U.S. does in this region. You have our current Defense Secretary, Mark Esper, on This Week this morning. What do you think this raid against Baghdadi says about our current commitment to Syria and the fight against ISIS at a time when the president has publicly portrayed this as a fight over, as he calls it, sand 7,000 miles away?
Well, I think several special operations forces are going to be concerned because I believe they will think that right now President Trump is probably saying, we're done. We've got al-Baghdadi. We can get out of there very quickly, even though they are leaving a residual force, a small residual force in Syria. And I think that is the concern, because this is not over. This is a very big deal that they got Baghdadi, but that does not end this. It is an ideological movement, as we know. It all over social media. This is how it began. This is how they used the internet to get more recruits. They still try to do that. So that will continue, and he will be seen as a martyr.
As Martha just said, this is not over. Martha Raddatz, really appreciate your analysis on this big morning. And I want to remind you, Martha has a big show this morning, as discussed. She's going to go one-on-one with Defense Secretary Mark Esper on the latest developments from Syria. Plus, she'll speak exclusively with the head of the impeachment inquiry. That's Congressman Adam Schiff, the Democrat. It's all coming up on This Week later this morning, right here on ABC. Martha, thank you again. Eva, over to you.
Well, now to our other breaking story. Overnight, a shooting at a homecoming celebration in Texas. At least 2 people killed with over a dozen injured. ABC's Stephanie Ramos joins us this morning with more. Good morning, Stephanie.
Eva, good morning. And that shooter is still on the run this morning. Investigators are desperate for clues. The FBI is now involved. That scene was so chaotic. Hundreds of people were at this party when authorities say someone opened fire with a semi-automatic rifle.
All first responders prepare for a possible mass casualty event.
2 people are dead, more than a dozen injured after a shooting at an off-campus college homecoming party near Greenville.
We're going to need multiple units. I've got hundreds of people.
Officials say the gunfire erupted at this event hall just before midnight. It was a chaotic scene with more than 700 people attending from across the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Everybody just left if they could. It was a big scramble.
Deputies responding to the area after receiving a complaint of cars parked on the highway near the party. 15 minutes later, gunshots.
We got one shot in the back.
All of this happening 18 miles away from Texas A&M University's Commerce campus. Texas A&M says this was not part of a university-sponsored event and haven't confirmed whether any students were involved. Investigators say people at the party are not helping identify the gunman.
We're not getting cooperation from the people that were attending the party. They saw nothing.
Authorities say even though they were on scene before the shooting even happened, they didn't see the shooter because there were so many people there. And guys, right now, police say they're not sure what the motive may have been, so they're still working this out.
Yeah, and they're not getting any cooperation either. That's not helpful.
Not at all.
Stephanie, thank you. Appreciate it.
We do want to turn now to politics and the impeachment inquiry. The White House responding to a former chief of staff's searing comment, a warning he says he gave the president months ago. ABC's David Wright is on Capitol Hill with more. David, good morning.
Good morning, Whit. This is a powerful I told you so from the president's own former chief of staff. General John Kelly now says that when he left the White House, he warned President Trump not to surround himself with yes men or he would likely face impeachment. Well, today, the White House is pushing back hard. The retired Marine Corps general who served as White House chief of staff for a year and a half, John Kelly, told a conference in Sea Island, Georgia, that in his final days on the job, he offered the president a piece of advice.
I said, whatever you do, and we were still in the process of trying to find someone to take my place. I said, whatever you do, don't hire a yes man, someone that's going to tell you, or it won't tell you the truth. Don't do that. Because if you do, I believe you'll be impeached.
President Trump promptly issued a written statement insisting John Kelly never said that. He never said anything like that. Kelly's statement came on a day when impeachment investigators heard from the latest in a series of State Department officials. Philip Rieker, America's top diplomat in Europe, appeared under subpoena in defiance of the State Department's non-cooperation order. He reportedly told the committee that he and others tried to stand up for the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine when she was the target of a smear campaign fueled by conspiracy theories, but that top State Department officials shut them down.
I've known him for a number of years. I think he's being honest and telling us what he's observed.
Republicans on the committee say Rieker did not give any new evidence that would incriminate the president.
The testimony was, in broad terms, was a good day for the president, a good day for the American people.
I think his testimony is credible. There's just no earth-shattering revelations. Nothing is new. It's the same stuff.
But the evidence is starting to pile up, say the president's critics, including House Speaker Nancy Pelosi in Iowa.
For a long time, I said he isn't worth impeaching because it further divides the country, until it became so clear. And I always said, when we get more facts, we will be ready. And we were ready.
Ahead this week, investigators here at the Capitol are expected to hear from several top deputies to former National Security Advisor John Bolton, and the committees are in touch with Bolton himself, hoping to get him on the stand. He is the witness the Democrats most want to hear from, both because of reported friction over Ukraine policy and because he's someone with a lot of cachet among conservatives. Dan?
Yeah, that's a huge question hanging over this whole process. Will he testify? And if he does, what will he say? David Wright from Capitol Hill, we really appreciate it. We're going to move on now, though, to another big and developing story this morning, the dangerous wildfires burning in California. The forecast is calling for conditions to get much worse today. Gusts already reaching 80 miles an hour in some places, a historic wind event, according to the National Weather Service. Thousands have been evacuated from their homes, and Rob is right there on the ground in Berkeley, California. Rob, good morning to you.
Good morning, Dan. And that number of people evacuated now at 90,000 across Sonoma County. Nearly 1 million electricity customers have had their power preemptively cut off to avoid more fire starts. This as the wind begins to freshen, fanning the flames of that massive Kincaid fire.
This morning, the Kincaid fire rapidly heating up. Firefighters battling intensifying flames as an extreme historic wind event unfolds. This smoke-nado forming as a result of the erratic winds. Ambulances from a local hospital seen hauling patients away as the fire's threat grows. Tens of thousands now forced to evacuate parts of Northern California.
Evacuations are not suggestions. If you are in an evacuation zone, you are in the path of danger.
Winds already gusting up to 80 miles per hour, threatening to push the Northern California Kincaid fire into nearby populated areas. That fire currently stretching across nearly 26,000 acres and is just 11% contained.
We're expecting significant increases in winds, gusts in some parts of our state.
Our Will Reeve is in deserted Healdsburg after residents evacuated there.
Normally, the town of Healdsburg would be bustling, but with evacuation orders in place, 50,000 people told to get out from here and other towns nearby as critical danger looms. The Kincaid fire burning tens of thousands of acres just over the hill.
Bumper-to-bumper traffic stretching down Sonoma County roads. Some families unsure of where they're headed.
Next stop could be Fort Bragg, or we could head down to Novato.
Utility company PG&E began its public safety cutoff of power to approximately 940,000 customers across 38 counties.
When debris hits these wires, any spark can be an ignition source of a catastrophic wildfire.
As they wait for more wind in Southern California, as the tick fire, which so far has damaged 34 structures, is now 55% contained.
You can see the lights are still on behind me here in Berkeley, California, but we do expect to see potentially damaging winds here across the San Francisco Bay Area, in the East Bay, and especially the North Bay, where the winds are really starting to crank right now. So here's a setup. This high pressure is building in and really tightening that pressure gradient. So that's what's getting the air to move, and it'll really be ripping across parts of over the mountaintops and through the canyons. And we have wind alerts and fire weather alerts, and that critical fire, extremely critical fire weather conditions expected in the next few hours just to the east of where I'm standing. Santa Rosa, 32 easily. We've already had gusts in the hills to 80 miles per hour, and then the offshore winds will continue down across Southern California beginning tonight through tomorrow. Similar situation. This is a little colder wind event than we saw earlier in the week, but another one coming Wednesday, Thursday, and that could be even stronger, especially for Southern California. So this is a pattern, unfortunately, that just refuses to quit. That's what's happening weather-wise across East Coast or West Coast. Time now for a look at your local forecast.
Good Sunday morning. I'm Stormwatch 7 meteorologist Ryan Miller here in the Weather Center. We've got plenty of rain across the region, even a chance that we could see some thunder here late morning between 10 a.m. and about lunchtime. So be careful if you plan to be outside. We're going to dry out, though, this afternoon. And this evening, it looks great and fantastic for baseball. We're going to be dry. We're going to be mild. And it looks like we could get good baseball weather here this evening. Tomorrow, sunshine near 70 degrees. Same on Tuesday.
And on the East Coast, the rain has moved in. Going to be kind of a nasty day, guys, for you, unfortunately. But we would love to have some of that rain here where they desperately need it.
Yeah, we're not going to complain about that this morning.
Right.
Well, now to World Series, a big-time blowout at the expense of the Washington Nationals. The Houston Astros tying it up 2-2. Janae is here with more on that game. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Eva. Like you said yesterday, this has really been a series for the team on the road. And last night, a big game for Houston.